So, welcome to our session today. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Rohit. I'm the founder and CEO at Excel Data. I have been running this company for over 3 years. We are about 100 people working across multiple geographies, including US, Europe, Singapore, and India. With me today is Krishnan Bhagavath, the VP Engineering of Healthedge. Krishnan and I have worked in the past together at an internet startup called InMobi. And Krishnan has also worked at other places, including companies like Yahoo, Altiscale, and currently he's been there at Healthedge for the last 3 to 4 years. And he's been driving a massive data-driven transformation for the software that they provide to healthcare providers across the US. So I'll let Krishnan introduce himself, and then we'll go from there.
It's a pleasure to be here. Nice to see everybody online. This COVID time, so we are making do with what we got here. So in terms of our data initiative, yes, like Rohit said, we have a few things going on at the moment. We are trying to consolidate healthcare data to a single unified source of information, not just for the care administration, but into some of the details that we'll go into in terms of how we employ big data solutions to many things that we do. It's a pleasure to discuss with you on this topic. Yeah.
Thanks, Krishnan. So what is like the big change that's happening in the healthcare industry when it comes to data-driven transformation? What are you guys driving towards? What is the objective? What's the North Star?
So in terms of when we look at data and specifically its application for healthcare, right, we saw this transformation happen in the ad industry, to be specific, right, going back to our previous experience. Now, when we look at harvesting this information for the betterment of either care administration, clinical care, or the financial performance of systems or auto adjudication, as we speak about in our industry, right, there's a massive implication of what you can do with data. Now, healthcare, as we all know, is based on decisions that are heavily reliant on abundance of data, right? How many data points can you stitch together? And how do we bring this crucial data in front of a person who has to make a call, right? Be it for the financials aspects of how we look at healthcare or care administration, the operational aspects in terms of billing, claims, enrollment, and retention of members within a healthcare system, care administration as far as that goes in terms of how we administer care at scale. And of course, the network development, right? How do you develop a network of providers and how do you provide services around the critical needs of healthcare, right? So that's basically where we are looking at this point in time, and that we do expect, not just for ourselves, but as the larger industry adopts or commoditizes, what we have seen in the social media space in terms of data and its accessibility for care. This is going to grow, right? And hence our investments are significantly focused around data and how we bring this meaningful information to our customers as well. Me at Healthedge, we have 3 core businesses that we look at. We had the payment, which we started, which is Healthedge all about, right? It's about payment administration and things like that. We have the care that we brought together from Altruista, right, which is basically a product that looks at care administration, and of course from billing and editing of claims part of it, we have Burgess join the family. I'm happy to announce that yesterday we brought into our family WellFirst, and that's in the public domain now. Press release came out yesterday. So that's the family of companies that are coming together. And what that means for us is how we administer care, right? How we administer billing aspects of this sort of thing. So yeah, happy to explore more in terms of how we use your tools and techniques here.
So what kind of complexity are you now dealing with? The first time that we spoke, you were undergoing a massive transformation. At that point in time, you were moving away from a monolithic RDBMS structure. And, the sort of the initial brief that we were given at Excel Data was that, we're going to completely move towards distributed data systems. And, this whole ecosystem is going to get more and more complex because we are expecting a lot more data from third-party sources. We are expecting more data within the enterprise to flow into these distributed data sources. And that you had a community of different kinds of users within, Healthedge, which included data scientists, analysts, healthcare providers, and that whole ecosystem was being built. So what are the different kinds of needs of your data users? Who are the people who are making these demands on these data systems? What kind of data do they expect?
So in terms of what data means to us, right, and it is initially, from the architecture that we were in and the kind of scale that we saw, right, as the needs of the business grow, right, if you're looking at, billing and having efficiencies around billing, That's one situation. When you're looking at administering care at scale, you need a lot more signals into your system, right? And you need to reduce that noise within that set of systems that you bring in. So for us, the first and most important thing as we look at transformation, and not just as technology initiative, but also in terms of what it can do for our customers, right? We always approach it from outside in. Now, one of the things that we recognize and realize in this business is that we are a company that went through the evolution of technology, right? And as far as that is concerned, we are looking at how do we improve the patient care, or how do we administer patient care, right? From that perspective, we need a significant volume of data, right? That means that would traditional RDBMS solve for that problem? Well, for smaller customers, yes. If you had tenancy defined within those customers, right, you're looking at data in a myopic way, right? As you look at aggregates, right, as you look at data across multiple dimensions, right, whether it's care, or whether it's being able to look at billing efficiency, auto adjudication rates, and what controls these parameters, right? So in such a setting, what you need to know is to understand how these changes impact across a larger frame, right? For us, I'll give you an example, right? Let's say the auto adjudication rate is at a certain rate for a customer A versus B, right? We want to understand what the nuances between these two systems are, and how do we help our customers to reach the level of automation. And this means a lot in terms of when you're looking for pre-auths, and somebody is waiting at a clinic to get a certain procedure done or a certain service done. You can't wait over a period of time, right, to figure out whether he's eligible for these procedures. So they have practical implications. So the modernization need is based on multiple axes. One of the axes that we see is that, okay, look, can we now look at the systems that we have today and then see how we can pivot it for what we need to do for tomorrow? And clearly, horizontal scale, as far as this particular vertical scale, can only get you that far, right? And we have kind of recognized that some of the disruptions that happen outside of this industry can definitely apply for what we want to do from a data perspective, right? So from that point of view, we set up our first data science and ML operations. And toward that, right, data being the feeder for any of these initiatives, we want to make sure that we bring that in a meaningful way, so that we can bring these changes to our customers in a manner of speaking that is more practical at a member level. So we look at the ecosystem as three main actors, right? We have the health plans, with which the providers work. That's the second actor, right? So the health plans, the provider, and the member. Now, our systems need to talk the language that is appropriate across these three domains, right? What you look at patient or member care is quite different than when you look at adjudication efficacy, right? Or how do you price a plan? How do you look at cost risk or risk approximation of a particular health plan? So there's that aspect of it. So yes, long story short, data is crucial for us, and in this journey, right, we're trying to assemble, and toward that, we are looking at modernizing one step at a time, right? And clearly, the case of bringing data into a distributed cluster makes a lot of sense from our situation right now.
What kind of pressures? This is like saying that data is almost crucial. Data is sort of very, very important for Healthedge and its customers, and eventually the people who use and utilize these healthcare systems. What does operability mean in this world? What kind of challenges do you see in operating the software across multiple customers, different VPCs, different DCs? What kind of challenges do you face on an ongoing basis? Because I can give a backdrop of this question as well, for our audience today. I think we started engaging when you were looking for an observability solution, and it was surprising to me that you were investing in observability way ahead of time. In fact, you started the data platform efforts and the observability effort right in tandem, and I'm sure that you drew upon your experiences from the past. But could you just highlight what kind of operability challenges do you have currently, and what do you foresee in the future?
Especially when you're teething with technology, right? And in our initial days, as we looked at big data and its implication for us as an ecosystem, right, as a talent pool, there are multiple issues that we have to look at, right? One is to build software such that it becomes a service, or the infrastructure itself, the provisioning, the aspects of how we run our software within these environments, right? We want to make sure that there is enough maturity in the process of how we develop these systems and then roll them out, right? That's one aspect of it. But once you have a system that's built out, it's too late if you go back and try to correct it, right? If you say, okay, look, the system is performing at n throughput, right, or it requires a cluster of a certain size to solve for a problem. Now, many situations that we see, there are patterns to which we look at data, right? For example, how do we assemble massive data sets and then say, okay, look, and these are the dimensions in which we want to work through them, right? So investing earlier on has yielded massive dividends for us, right? We are looking at optimization at the beginning rather than at the end, right? Churn something out and then figure out how efficient these systems are. So in terms of the cluster size, in terms of how we look at what kind of volumes and loads we put on these servers, right? As we have seen from our past experience, not having an observable platform or observability platform, so to speak, has its own challenge, right? People will develop systems around it, and this time and day, people expect these to be a commodity, right? So you have your data sciences team running queries, and you have your analytics running their queries on these backend systems, and they can have loads and aberrations in terms of how we consume these hardware and those situations. We want to have an early view, right? It is common that you have seen in the traditional world where people build applications and then put an observability platform around it, right? Be it whatever, like we've evolved from the world of SARS to D-trace and things like that to study system performance and the throughput of those systems. As we look at big data, when you have a cluster operating, it's not normal to have these reports collate and then look through them. That it itself becomes an operation for us. And from a cost proposition, right, both what I've seen at Pointillist through Altisource and prior to that at InMobi and Yahoo as well, this is critically important, right? Your solution is only going to work as efficient as it's built out to, right? Having that view, having that 360-degree view in terms of how the ecosystem is working, performing, and have that early bird's eye view into it without doing a root canal, right? As a system, as a company, we want to focus on healthcare, right? We want to focus on bringing meaningful care to our audience. Now, from that perspective, right, we can look at it two different ways. We are a software manufacturer. We involve a lot of human touch points in terms of how we look at system performance, or do we automate these things and build the systems that make a meaningful difference. For us, the latter made a lot of sense, right? We are looking at building systems that actually work and operate efficiently. Now, in terms of the variety of data that we look for, right, and that also presents a challenge when we look at pharma data versus regular claims that are commercial claims or Medicare claims or Medicaid claims, right? There are very varied variations of it. And when we look at our customer consumption of this data, right, they also look for things around file formats and things that are required from a regulatory perspective that we expose our data in a certain way. Now, that said, it is critical for us to not only build these systems that act as gateway for others to tap into our data, but also be able to run meaningful queries and things where we don't have to go back and ask an entire army to stand up and say, okay, look, expand the cluster by 500 nodes or whatever, right? So this gives us that ability, the ability to foresee what might likely happen for a given workload, and then to project it out as the systems like Pulse and Torch enable us to do. It is critically important for us to leverage rather than invest on what we think is rather interesting concepts, but at the moment, right, it is something that we have come to expect from these tools.
So would it be fair to say that it is almost like buying an insurance policy against either patterns of overspend or patterns of instability as you actually start scaling your system? Have you used this as sort of making sure that your operability challenges which you foresee in the future, they are taken away today as you start investing in the platform? So was it like an advanced step that you took? And as you described earlier, how did you look at the investment itself? What kind of initiatives or agreements that you had to bring within your team? How did you actually ended up communicating this to both sides of your team, which is data engineering teams which are implementing it, but also the execs who were sort of sponsoring it, yourself included? How did you go about making the selection?
It's interesting, right? So what we have seen in the industry from the past engagements as well and past experiences, right? You try to bring the best practices to what you bring at work. So from that perspective, what we have seen, I mean, not just here, right, and outside as well. Like if you talk about clusters that are running today, the point list at scale, right? There's a lot of teething pain and a lot of investment that went through to mature a cycle, right? So it's especially important when the company has not done that sort of modernization before. So when you're starting, I mean, hindsight is always 2020, right? And you always are perfect when you look back in time and then try to perfect it, right? So the experience that we have in terms of building these clusters and then making sure that we don't take a wrong step, right? Because at the end of the day, cost is a factor, right? If you try to assemble these things at at the scale at which we were planning to do or which we're continue to do, right? It becomes important. Like I'll give you a practical example, right? There are customers today who look to inform their members if their benefits are changing, or if there is an underutilization or an overutilization of a certain benefit, right? Or if there is a better way to administer care to them, right? These are systems that are traditionally being like you would get this information a month later, which is probably due or I mean, in certain critical care conditions, these are not things that you want to do at a later point in time. You want to intervene at a point in time and when you see these events. So there is the real timeness of the data or the richness of data and how you assemble these inference systems, right? So to answer the question in terms of how do you bring a diverse force which has worked on technology stack that are probably different in the past to what we're looking at in the future, it is important that we don't spend a whole lot, or at least our cost controls are in place, right? So from that perspective, not only to set up the operations, right, as infrastructure as code or as platform as a service for our teams, right, but also to actually look at what efficiencies these systems can give us, right? It has helped a long way, and that conversation helps a lot when you actually look at the trouble you have to going through a number of logs to figure out where the work aberrations happened and things like that, right? When you have a dashboard as clean as what we see with Pulse and Torch, it becomes extremely clear that there's a missing piece. There is a missing piece to the puzzle, right? And how you solve it is a different issue. Now, for us being early partners with Axel helped a lot because we not only know that the team and the talent there has worked on building these. I mean, you always want to go to the people who have done it before, right? So that in our case, it makes it a lot more easier when we say that, okay, look, these are people who worked at Horton or at Cloudera, right? They know what they're preaching, and then that's the efficiency we bring. There's two ways to learn this. One is the traditional method that we applied in the social media industry, right? You go through, a set of MapReduce functions or whatever white papers are published, read through them, and then try and apply the optimization to your scale. The other end of the spectrum is that you look at, okay, look, this is what it is. I mean, we have come to a situation where these are expected as learnings, right, from past practices. So that's what we see these tools bring to us. Not only that, we have the dashboards to infer what we need to infer and how to fine tune our systems, but also to tap on a talent pool that we think is nudging us to the right direction. So that was an easy conversation. I think the team enjoyed the interactions and, it's just learning, and it's constantly. I would say that we are only scratching the surface of what we can do with data, right? When you look at prescriptions or clinical notes that we want to analyze and take secondary inferences out of that, right? So at that point you have to ask the hard question: do you want to look at logs to figure out which machine is running at a certain throughput, or to figure out methods or means to interpret information that has traditionally gone unnoticed or uncapitalized, right? With CMS opening its gate with all these regulatory concerns, which says that, okay, look, you can expose data for 7 years or 8 years of your medical records is accessible to a health plan. How does the health plan really harvest that information, right? What are the methods and techniques that you can apply? So we focus on that aspect of the business, right? So for us, it's very important to highlight those aspects, and then when we look at operability concerns, right, we would definitely wanted to make it a function that we can tap on some.
Let me sort of, tug on that a little bit, just a little bit. You talked about the importance of data in the industry because, it matters a lot. I think it matters to somebody's health, and eventually, therefore, data needs to be reliable. Data reliability is a big challenge for the healthcare industry, especially, given the backdrop of what's happened in the last, 10 years post Obamacare, especially how, data is flowing between practitioners, actually physicians, doctors, customers, and healthcare providers such as yourselves, and actually software providers such as yourself and healthcare providers. So it actually puts together a very large constituency. The possibilities of bad data ending up into your repositories is quite high, and therefore something like Torch made sense over there. But give us some more information over there as to how you're going ahead and thinking about preventive data reliability, making sure that data that is flowing into the cloud data warehouses or the big data lakes, those are actually of really high quality. And what does it mean in the long term? Why is this a discipline that you think that healthcare industry and other companies should also pursue?
In terms of what we see as reliable data, right? I mean, we do get signals from multiple sources. There are pharma claims, there are medical claims, there are situations or observations made when somebody is going through care administration, right? So to qualify what data is important, right? What is noise and what is signal, right? There has got to be a certain level of filter that we built into these systems, right? So that could mean anywhere from what we say as, okay, look, this set of data doesn't make sense for what we are trying to build as a core asset, right? So identifying meaningful information that's embedded in claims. So when you look at claims, right, today it is, it's pretty archaic the way data gets exchanged between systems, right? And then to preserve it in a format that other systems can influence or interpret those data elements, you really need to have, like you said, the lineage of data, right? Where did it come from? How did it origin? What were the interpretation made? Which practitioner made what interpretation at a certain time, right? That has to be collated, right? So our view on this is that we are assembling this, right? And there's a lot to be learned. I mean, we do not know how to in certain cases, like say, okay, this is the data that I do want to keep, or this is the data I don't want to preserve, right? So we preserve everything today, right? And the system that qualifies as to what needs to be used for a certain scenario, right? That those are getting built out, right? So yes, data quality is important, but for us, I think at this moment in time, right, we are looking at putting it all together.
The next section of the question would be a little bit to do with, the sort of the technology landscape. Can you describe, what does the technology landscape at Healthedge looks like? And when we started, there was basically Oracle, Golden Gate, and you were considering, full-fledged automation on the cloud. And then we learned from you that this is going to be a completely, infrastructure as a code, which then has to go into different kinds of ecosystems. Your customers are, on Azure, on AWS, on on-premise data lakes in VPCs. How are you thinking about, this evolving technology landscape, and, what are the things at play? There's data at rest, there's data in motion, there's data that needs to be made available for consumption. And just like you said earlier, that there's data which is also coming from, all kinds of third-party sources, including, and compliance also puts a lot of, sort of stress on these systems in their own way.
There is a lot to unpack here, right, in terms of the technology stack, right? So one of the things that a system like this necessitates, right, from a healthcare perspective, is the ability to get the most recent, right? The recency of data is important to us. That means the gates of our system needs to not only accommodate what we think as batch loads or things that come as massive data sets at a point in time, but also have the ability to now tap onto devices that are like IoT enabled, right? So for example, we say, okay, look, somebody is on a certain health condition, right? We want to tap into his devices that actually give some input about their health situation, right? So the way we look at it is that from the gates of the system, right, we do have, of course, the batch loads, or what we call as the scoop based jobs that actually bring in data from traditional relational stores that we have had, or ODS, or operational data stores that we have within our systems, right? That actually comes through these scoop-based scripts that actually excavate the data and then put them in the landing zone, right? So once that data arrives in the landing zone, now of course we have, from a streaming pipe perspective, we are a Kafka enabled gate, right? We have one that actually enables us to trap these signals from outside, and of course we use Oracle Golden Gate for big data to actually listen into these CDS changes, right? As far as the front load is concerned, right? So that's where the data comes from. And of course, once it arrives into our backend systems, right, we have a bunch of jobs that are enabled once it arrives into our HDFS cluster, right? So again, here We are using traditional open source tech stack, thanks to our friends who actually figure out which versions at Excel, who figure out which version of software has an interplay with another, right? Even that could be a subject to discuss, right? What makes the softwares work? What makes this family of this open source technologies that we use work together, right? We want to be an open source shop because we don't have a whole. I mean, I'm happy to say that we have very little license costs that we have to pay as a software manufacturer. That's very important for us, right? We don't pay OEM cost on any of the associated technologies that we have to use to assemble this set of information. So we are a Hive Spark-based jobs run in the backend, right? So we have Hudi as the layer of store, and over which we run our Spark and Hive jobs, right, to actually look at the data. And then from there, our ML AI teams run their set of analytics on top of it, right? So from a technology perspective, we kind of kept it simple, right? We have the Oracle Golden Gate pushing it, Oracle Golden Gate for big data, I should say, pushing in the data through a Kafka pipeline into our ecosystem, right? And to this ecosystem, we bring data. We of course run all our jobs within this Hadoop ecosystem, right? Which has now become pretty much easy for the team because we don't have to go through the hardship of figuring out, like in the traditional shops, right? Setting up these clusters, tearing them apart. For that, for us it is just a service, right? We just use the dev automation cycles that have come through that pipe. So our jobs run under the NiFi, Apache NiFi initiative, right? So basically that's where we are scheduling our jobs and then ingesting this data into our cloud. And of course, as you said, like we had aspirations to go on AWS, which we are, right? It's working on AWS. We have aspirations to go on Azure as our customers fall in play, right? This becomes like a cloud agnostic operation for us. And again, from an ingest source, right, we are looking at traditional EDI way of ingesting data into our farm, and that formats will change, right, as things evolve. We do know that the data ingestion pipes, the way of processing these data structures, right, as we see it, right, they will change as well. So for us, it's very important that we keep this cluster or this set of technologies kind of flexible and be ready to answer a business question as they emerge.
I think this is a good template, a good model for anybody who is doing a data-driven transformation, moving away from monolithic databases into distributed databases and exposing it for data for consumption in different kinds of interfaces. There's SQL, machine learning, AI, dashboarding, custom reporting, reporting for compliance. I think the number of use cases that are showing up in the healthcare industry is just phenomenal. And healthcare industry itself it seems to me that it's poised for massive transformation. We talk to other healthcare customers quite regularly, and what we are seeing is the trends and patterns that you've just uncovered. It is almost identical. Of course, you guys have an advantage because of being in the space and operating in it for a long time. But I'm sure that observability can potentially also make you competitive because you're also stabilizing and operating your systems at scale at a cost that is unbeatable. To your earlier point that you don't pay too much of OEM costs. I think it's a huge advantage because it ends up bringing down the cost of delivery of your software to your customers, which then eventually ends up bringing down the cost for the healthcare provider, and hopefully someday we'll start seeing that benefits getting transferred to the eventual consumers.
I just want to expand that one, right? What you just talked about, Rohit, because that's very, very important. What I've seen from previous experience in past episodes in terms of how a big data cluster is built and how much money is involved in this sort of thing, right? And what it could end up costing the team, right? Because you run into teething problems not just in provisioning systems but also in terms of how massive they can grow over a period of time, right? So this has been a massive saving for us in terms of how I look at it, because if you really went the traditional route, right, you're not able to classify, right, how to set the growth for those clusters and then how to shrink them back down, right? So basically that has been a huge benefit and gain for us, having the ability to observe what's happening within our clusters, right, in terms of the utilization and stuff like that. I think that is significant, right, from going back to our experience with Yahoo to some form in Mobi and to a larger degree what we saw at Pointillist, right? It's just really, really insightful to actually have that initial gain before we go all the way down and then start struggling with it.
Krishnan, thank you so much for your time today. We all agree that market conditions are changing, immensely. I think every company which is trying to make a dent in particularly in the consumer or, anything which is serving the end consumers, I think they'll have to deal with increasing volumes of data to make it very personable and, something which is very specific and meets the needs of the eventual consumer. And therefore, companies such as yourself will be sort of, tasked with understanding more and more data. And that sort of, puts pressure on two things, and as we discussed and as you sort of outlined for our listeners today over here, the audience over here, which is that data quality is really important and cost savings are going to be critical as, the cloud costs keep going up, I think. And that's where I think a lot of customers can benefit from, data observability. Once again, thank you so much for sharing all the insights from the healthcare industry today. And, we look forward to doing this with you again.
Thanks for having me, and we have benefited from these interactions, right? Not just in terms of using tools and techniques, but in terms of putting the right set of technology stack for the initiatives that are appropriate, not just from how we look at data, but also in the larger domain of how we can grow the quality of data and the lineage of data, right? So it's been a fantastic experience and a joint discovery in some cases. So yeah, we appreciate that for sure.